In this lecture, we're going to introduce the concept of single unit commands because we have a lot of workers selected and we tell one of them to go build a building. We don't want all of them to try to build a building at the same location. Let's start in our iCommand interface. We're going to need to add something new here. A public bool is single unit command with a public get. And we need to attach this to the iCommand because this is the thing that we interact with on our player input. Our base command is our abstract class that implements this interface, so we also need to add it here. Let's add a field serialized field so we can see it in the inspector. Public bool is single unit command with a public get and a private set. We'll leave it false by default because this is going to be a little bit of a special use case. Most commands will probably apply to all of the units that we have. Then let's come over to the player input. Down here in handle right click is one of the places where we're issuing the commands. Now, after we check if we can handle something, we handle it. We need to also check if it's a single unit command and return. That way we'll stop as soon as that happens and we won't try to issue it to the rest of the units. But remember that we do have another way to issue the commands. If the command requires a click to activate, we'll come over to activate action. And down here, we stopped checking if we can handle because it introduced some weird behaviors and didn't play nice with our resume building. And we were just locking stuff on the UI when it wouldn't be able to be handled, and it wasn't really a big deal. But now, I think it's important that we do check it here. So we're going to need to make a couple additional changes. We'll wrap our activeCommand.handle with an if activeCommand.canHandle, providing the context. And then again, right after we handle, do if activeCommand.isSingleUnitCommand, and then just break out of this loop. Let's come over to Unity to highlight why this canHandle check is important and think about what we need to change to make it work. Let's keep our 400 minerals supply cost SO to really have 0 minerals so we can build these things without having to worry about gathering a bunch of minerals. And our command post can keep the default 60 build time. We also need to change our command, the build command post command, to be a single unit command. That way we'll make sure to abort and only send one command per click. If we click play, and remember this isn't going to quite work right. If we take one worker and tell them to build a command post and we left click, we can't issue that command because we're clicking on the terrain and our build building command is checking if the hit context collider is not null. And because we're hitting the terrain, we're hitting this block here and the terrain does not have a base building. So this returns false. If we simply elevated this check up about checking for the collider, then whenever we right clicked, this would return true if we have enough supplies and we're just clicking any valid location and our workers would always try to build something. So that also doesn't quite work for us. We might say that we need a little bit more context provided to the build building command for it to be able to make an informed decision. Right now, we just don't know enough to be able to distinguish whether we should or shouldn't allow this command to be handled. In our command context, let's add a public mouse button, which comes from Unity Engine Input System Low Level. Call it mouse button with a public get and a private set. All this does is gives us an enumeration to tell which button on the mouse we're talking about. Then in our constructor for the command context, let's add that as the last argument, mouse button, and give it a default value of mousebutton.left. And then format this a little bit, it's just a little bit too long. And at the bottom of the constructor, assign our capital mouse button to the mouse button argument. Now, why is the mouse button the way that we want to approach solving this? If we come back into Unity just to take a look at this, our interaction paradigm states that if we're going to build and we click here on the Actions UI, then we're going to left click to issue this command. And there are no cases when we would left click to issue a command where we'd try to resume because we're trying to place a new building. However, if we right click on an existing building that's in progress, that's the case where we would expect that we're going to try to resume that building. But there would never be a case where we right click and we're trying to build a brand new building. So that gives us a good way to differentiate between the two flows of that command. Let's come back to our player input and make sure that we're going to pump in the right values to the context whenever we're going to call canHandle and handle. When we're going to activate action, that's our left click. So we don't need to change our constructor because the default value is left click. However, for the right click, whenever we're making this command context, we need to specify that. So for the last parameter there, let's do comma mouse button. And we'll import this Unity Engine Input System Low Level and just provide right. Now we'll be sure whenever we're calling canHandle and handle to have the right mouse button provided. There's one more consideration that we need to have. Again, let's come back to Unity. Let's say I have these two workers selected, and the left one is the first one in our collection of selected units. If we click build, one of these command posts, it's not going to work right now, but if I click this one, then our left worker came over here to try to build that one. I click build a new command post, and I click somewhere else. We'd want the first worker to say it cannot handle that command because it's trying to build something already. So the second worker would go there. That way, when we're in a high heat battle and I need to spam place a lot of buildings, such as the supply huts, because I found out I'm supply capped in the middle of a battle, come back to my base and I select a bunch of workers and say, build me like 5 different supply huts. I'd want to select 5 workers and tell them just to build. And we'd expect those workers to run off one at a time to build those, not have the same one try to take every one of those commands. If we come back to VS Code, on our iBuilding builder, it seems like we need a way to query for, are we building? So here, let's attach a property, public bool is building with a public get. And then on our worker up here at the top, we can define that as a public bool is building, and we can just do an expression bodied property here to say graph agent.get variable command out Blackboard variable of type unit commands. We'll just call it command. And the command.value equals unit commands.build building. What this does then is anytime we try to query for, is this worker building, we're going to get the command off from our Blackboard and check if it equals build building, because that's issued as soon as we left click to issue the command. Now we've been building up to this and talking about it a whole bunch. It's time in our build building command for the challenge. I know you knew this was going to be the challenge already. Your challenge is to update the build building command can handle, so we'll only allow resuming when right-clicking a building, and it will never return true if the provided iBuilding builder is already building. Pause the video, take a minute to think about how this could be refactored to support this new flow, and I'll see you back here in a few minutes. All right, welcome back. The actual changes here are pretty straightforward. It's just about making the right change. So we said if the building builder is building, we don't want to do anything, right? We want to return false. So at the top if in our Guardian pattern where we're checking if the context commandable is not iBuilding builder, we can just get a reference to that builder with builder and then do or builder.isBuilding. That means if the commandable is a building builder, but it is building, we're going to still return false. That will prevent us from ever issuing the command to a builder who's already building something. The second part is we want to make sure that we only do this stuff, basically, if we've right-clicked. If we left-click, we don't care about doing any of this. It doesn't matter what the collider is if we've left-clicked. So if the context hit collider is not equal to null and the context.mouse button is equal to the right mouse button, then we'll still do all the same stuff we were doing before. So if the context collider is null or we've left-clicked, we're just going to check, do we have enough supplies and all the restrictions pass? That's enough. And that's all that we were looking for in this challenge. A little bit nuanced, but now everything should be working much nicer together. Let's take a look at it in the Unity editor. We'll click play. Let's select 4 workers, and remember our command posts are still free. Let's build 1, build 2, build 3, and build 4. There we go. Every time a different worker took the command, and now we can't build anything because there's no more workers that have the ability to do that. And if we select a random worker and start right-clicking, they can move. Let's make sure the resume is still working. Let's take this one, worker 4 for me, delete them. So that should raise the worker died event and this building should get paused. And then this worker, if I right click, there we go. They start resuming that building. Everything's still working great. That's all we've got for this lecture. We've now introduced that concept of single unit commands so we can restrict how many workers or how many things are trying to execute a given command. When you're ready to move on, I'll see you up on the next one.